so excited about this opportunity. When Leah asked me if I would be willing to speak, I jumped at the opportunity. Not only because I love public speaking, but because I am so passionate about what I'm going to be talking to you about today. In the next few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about my generation and yours, and the situation we find ourselves in. Next, I want to tell you about I'm Tomorrow, the organization I helped start that is preserving and educating my generation and yours about the principles that made our nation great. And finally, I want to inspire you to engage, if you're not already, and actively investing in my generation today for the future of America. But before I get started, let me tell you just a little bit about myself, because you may be wondering why a 16-year-old is speaking to you this morning instead of sitting in a classroom somewhere. Well, there are actually 3 reasons I'm here. The first, like I said, is I'm so passionate about my country, my generation, and my future. The second reason I'm here this morning is because someone cared enough about me and an organization I helped start called I'm Tomorrow to come alongside me and encourage me. That someone was Leah. A few months ago, my grandmother introduced us one evening after church, and Leah must have seen some potential in me because she took time out of her busy schedule to sit down with me and encourage me. It was supercharging. It was so inspiring. I felt this sense of, I can do it, like I've never felt it before. Not that I can do it alone, but that I can lead in pursuing my mission. And the third reason I'm here this morning, instead of sitting in a classroom somewhere, is because I'm homeschooled. And I guess you could say this will count as my communications class for the day. In 2008, I had the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. with my patriotic choir. Like Maria was saying, and I performed at the Voters Value Summit. And for 3 days, I heard some of the nation's leading conservative speakers. But the speaker who made the biggest impact on me was a 20-year-old activist named Lila Rose. Lila was articulate, passionate, and persuasive. She started an organization called Live Action, and you may have seen her on Fox News or CNN. Her recent work going undercover to Planned Parenthood to expose the unethical and deceptive lies of the largest abortion chain in America. I was impressed by her speech and inspired by her story of courage. And I left that conference with a desire and a passion to make a difference. I came home, and at 13 years old, I began making phone calls for my favorite political candidate. And that was the beginning of a passion for my country that has grown into a mission and an organization I'll tell you more about later. Let's talk for a minute about my generation and yours and the situation we find ourselves in. Whenever I have an opportunity to speak, usually someone will graciously tell me that they are so encouraged to see young people, my generation, engaged in the important matters relating to our country. There seems to be a sincere concern that my generation is mostly disengaged and unconcerned about the issues relating to our country. A concern that there will be no one who shares your values, who remembers America's greatness to restore our nation. I distinctly remember a conversation with my grandparents. Their generation is especially concerned. I believe this is very valid. I too am deeply concerned about my country and the role that my generation will play as we roll out in these next few generations. You probably have formed some opinions about my generation, but in all the negative facts that are spoken, there's actually a few positive facts that you may not know. For example, did you know that my generation tends to be closer to our parents than the previous generation? About a third of us name one or more of our parents as our hero rather than a pop culture celebrity. We tend to be more diverse and more inclusive. We're more accepting of people who disagree with us, but we're weaker on interpersonal skills. This is partly because we love technology. We use technology a lot. We're more likely to text you than talk to you. We download movies and music. We upload pictures to Facebook. But what about our politics? Jim Berkey, an associate professor at Concordia University, says, Generation Y will change America's political landscape. He argues that our growing up in the internet age has made us more independent and liberty-loving than any generation since the era of Andrew Jackson. My generation is more likely to be evolved. We're a generation of activists, young people who believe we can make a difference. But if we're going to look at my generation honestly, then we also have to look at some of the decisions that were made by the generations before us that led to the situation we're in today. Like removing prayers from our schools and taking the Ten Commandments off their walls. Removing any references to God and Christianity from our history books. Legalizing the killing of unborn babies in the name of personal choice. Allowing the creation of a financial system that prints money out of thin air, while career politicians run up a staggering $14 trillion in debt. You see, we're in this together. Somewhere along the way, we lost our way, and we have allowed our country to drift into an age of mediocrity, a period unlike either of us have ever known. What happened? How did we get here? And how do we get back on track? The truth is, we have drifted away from the basic and first principles laid out in our Constitution by our founding fathers. These principles were the framework of governing a free society. We as a nation have forsaken many of these principles, and we've adopted ones that are fundamentally opposed to our faith and the ideals outlined from the beginning. We must return to these principles if we hope to get our country back on track. But how? How can we, my generation and yours, turn a nation back to principles many of us never knew or barely remember? That's where I'm Tomorrow comes in. About a year ago, my older brother and I, along with support from my parents, had an idea to give young people with purpose a platform to express their ideas. A few months later, we visited our friend's Liberty discussion group, and we immediately knew what the purpose was. We had to help my generation and yours unite around these fundamental principles. We realized that my generation is fed up with the partisan politics, and your generation is entrenched in one of two political camps. We believe that if we can leave our politics at the door and unite around principles, we will discover that we have so much in common. And that will open the door to dialogue and education. So, what are these 7 principles, and where did they originate? They are ideals rooted in Christianity, but you may not know that if you were educated in our public schools, where these ideals are no longer being taught. Or if you listen to the rhetoric of our culture and media today. These are the principles in I'm Tomorrow language. Responsibility, prosperity, happiness, justice, security, liberty, peace. Here's what these principles stand for. Responsibility is the idea that the more people govern themselves, the less external government they need. Prosperity is sound money, having a stable currency. Happiness is a free market economy. Okay, now, when I think of happiness, I think of a lemonade stand. Because you can't have a lemonade stand without a free market. And you can't have a free market where the government controls or manipulates the system through farm subsidies and big bailouts. Justice. Laws aren't just because they're laws. Now, at I'm Tomorrow, we don't believe that we should break a law to change a law, but we do believe that we should break the silence to change an unjust law. Security is the sanctity of private property. Liberty is constitutionally limited government. Peace is self-determinist foreign policy. We believe that we should think twice before we send our troops somewhere. So, like I said, these principles come from Christianity. They're all rooted in Christianity and Christian values. That is, if you still believe we're a Christian nation. I'm going to give you an excerpt of one of my I'm Tomorrow speeches that talks specifically about this very important issue. Many popular history revisionists today would like to remove God from our history and our society. They say the United States never really was a Christian nation, that it was simply founded by a bunch of ambitious capitalists seeking to profit in the New World, and that Christianity has had little influence on today's American culture. These are becoming very popular ideas. Even President Obama has stated on several occasions that the United States is no longer a Christian nation, and that we Americans no longer consider ourselves a Christian nation. This is an interesting statement in light of a 2008 national survey finding that 76% of Americans call themselves Christians. But hey, does this really even matter? The question of whether the United States is or was ever a Christian nation? Who cares, right? As long as we all get along and tolerate one another's beliefs. Actually, it does matter. And it matters a lot. And here's why. If you and I stand by and allow all references to God and Christianity to be erased from the story of our country, then we will be allowing the destruction of the very framework that sustains our great society. In the next few minutes, I want to show you first that the United States is a Christian nation. Second, that it was founded by Christian men. And third, that it is currently sustained by a framework of Christian principles, all rooted in Christian values. First, the United States is a Christian nation. I like the way Supreme Court Justice David Brewer explained it. He said, the United States cannot be called a Christian nation in the sense that Christianity is the established religion, although we constantly speak of this republic as a Christian nation because Christianity has so largely shaped and molded it. John Adams, who most historians credit for formulating the essential concepts of the Declaration of Independence, said, the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. And President Teddy Roosevelt once said, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and entwined in our whole civic and social life that it would be literally impossible for us to figure to ourselves what that life would be if these teachings were removed. And there are many other examples. But the main point is that we are a Christian nation because the principles that hold this nation together are rooted in Christian values. Values intentionally written into the documents that govern our nation. And that brings me to my second point. This nation's founding fathers were Christians. Okay, so if we count the individual signers of the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution, and we add to that the non-signing delegates and the members of the First Federal Congress, that number adds up to 204 men. These we call the Founding Fathers. Let's look at the records of the day to see what we can learn about the religious beliefs of these men. Adherence.com is the largest collection of congregation statistics for over 4,000 religions. So I looked to see if any of the Founding Fathers were listed. Of the 204 Founding Fathers, none of them are Muslim. None of them were Hindu or Buddhist. In fact, all of them were Christians, whose names were publicly listed on church rolls. Let me be more specific. Of the 204 Founding Fathers, 88 of them were Episcopalian, 30 were Presbyterian, 27 were Congregationalists, 7 were Quakers, 6 were Dutch Reform, and the rest were spread across about half a dozen other denominations, all Christians. Okay, now here's where many argue that while these men may have had their names on church rolls, were they really Christians? Only God knows the hearts of men. But listen to the words of a few of them. Charles Carroll, signer of the Declaration of Independence, wrote, "On the mercy of my Redeemer, I rely for salvation." Benjamin Rush, another signer, wrote, "My only hope for salvation is in the infinite love through God, in the infinite love of God through the death of His Son upon the cross." Even Benjamin Franklin, during a stressful negotiation of the Constitution Convention, suggested that they should recess to pray. Were they really Christians? You decide that. But every founding father had a perspective, a worldview that was rooted in Christianity. Do you think any of these ideas, these values, made their way into the documents that have governed our nation for the past 200 years? Absolutely they did. And that's my third point. Our society is held together by a framework of principles, all rooted in Christianity, all working together to enable personal liberty, freedom, and prosperity like the world has never known. What are these principles? Here they are. First, the sanctity of private property. Remember, we call it security. The 8th commandment found in Exodus 20:15 says, "You shall not steal." If there were no private property rights, there would be no need to protect that property, since everything would belong to everyone. The sanctity of private property is rooted in Christianity. Another of these principles is self-government, responsibility. The idea that the more people govern themselves, the less external government they need. In the same way, if there are no morals to guide the people, more government is needed. James Madison said it this way: to suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is wishful thinking. Finally, the rule of law, justice. America was founded as a nation rooted in higher law, not in man's law. An example of this is found in the opening words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You see, it was well understood by these founding fathers that these unalienable rights are part of a higher law established by God, not by men. These are just 3 of the principles that I mentioned earlier, but the others include sound money, having a stable currency, constitutionally limited government, self-determinist foreign policy, and a free market economy. As I stated already, many would like to minimize the relevance of Christianity in our history and in our society, and that sentiment has reached the highest office in the land. President Obama is the very first president in our nation's history to publicly declare that the United States is no longer a Christian nation. And now that you've heard my declaration, based on accurate historical facts, and you've heard the words of some of our founding fathers and past presidents, you must decide whether you believe the United States is a Christian nation, founded by Christian men and governed by Christian principles. Here's a quote from Daniel Lapin from the Jewish Policy Center. He says, "Without a vibrant and vital Christianity, America is doomed. And without America, the West is doomed. Which is why I, an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, am so terrified of American Christianity caving in. God help Jews if America ever becomes a post-Christian society." Rabbi Lapin, a non-Christian, gets it. He understands that without the framework of principles woven together, working together, we cannot survive as a free society. You see, each time we eliminate God from the basis of even one of these principles, we weaken and ultimately destroy it, because the principle is rooted in a belief in God. Destroy these principles, and our society cannot be sustained. It will give in to a form of government that constricts and constricts and constricts, until it ultimately chokes out our freedoms, our personal liberty, and our prosperity. That's why I'm Tomorrow is so important for this time, and that's why I'm so passionate about these principles. We must be willing to stand up and defend our Christian heritage. We must be willing to stand up and defend these principles that are so important to our freedoms. We must be willing to stand up and defend each other. Because you see, if my generation blames yours for the mess we're in, or if your generation has low expectations for mine, we can't get anywhere. Okay, so if we're in this together, as I stated before, then how do we work together for excellence in an age of mediocrity? The real excellence is in our partnership, an unlikely pairing of extraordinary people from your generation and mine. You see, the mess we're in is more than one generation can fix. It'll take both of us working together today for a better tomorrow. My generation brings energy, passion, and a voice that can get the attention of our nation. And yours brings wisdom, experience, and resources that my generation doesn't have. Many young people like myself feel the sense of low expectations for our generation, from teachers, from coaches, and others who have bought into the idea that my generation is a mediocre one. I sometimes feel this strong sense of low expectations, but I've also experienced the opposite. I've had the incredible opportunity to experience the power of a great mentorship. I remember the first time I experienced this was from my choir director. Every Tuesday afternoon, we began practice with a Bible study, and she would often talk about what was happening in our world. But she would always tell us that we were going to go out and be the light in this dark world. She had so much faith in us that we would rise to the occasion. She didn't tell us, you can do this. She said, you are going to. Now is the time for us to rise to the occasion. I believe my generation will change America's political landscape. We will put our nation back on track. But we can't do it alone. It'll take both of us. We need people like you to come alongside us and believe in us. You know, if there's one message I'd ask you to walk away with today, it's that. Believe in us. I'm tired of the low expectations placed on my generation. Believe in us, and we will put our nation back on track. We will restore America together. When my family and I started On Tomorrow with some friends, I immediately knew what the purpose was. It's relevant and it's significant. The mission of I'm Tomorrow is to educate and inspire and engage Americans to unite around these 7 principles that made our nation great. Through our passionate, articulate, and creative voices using every media technology imaginable. A little bit about our organization. We've been built on a solid foundation. We have a board of directors. We've applied for our 501c3. We're in the process of that. We have a youth leadership team in place. And like Maria said, we hosted our very first event in January with over 400 people, with a well-known guest and economist as our speaker, Dr. Lawrence Reed. And we honored him with I'm Tomorrow's very first Freedom Award. I believe I'm Tomorrow is positioned to do something truly amazing. But I remember just a few months ago thinking, I can't do this. I'm only 15. What can I do? I can't lead. There are people in this organization who are older than I am, who have more experience. Who's going to step up and lead this? About that time, I met Leah. And you know what she did? She believed in me. She inspired me, she encouraged me, she told me I can do it. Leah is helping me pursue my dreams of making I'm Tomorrow a nationwide youth-inspired movement that can put our nation back on track. We at I'm Tomorrow need your generation. We can't do this without women like you, mentors like you, coming alongside us and investing in young leaders like me. We can't do this without people like you, through your help financially, through your prayers, through your encouragement, your introductions, your connections. Because if we don't have a platform to get our message out, we can't build On Tomorrow, and we risk losing the principles that can restore our nation. So that leads me to my final point. I am a product of mentorship. Through my parents, through a choir director, and now through Leah. Who are you believing in? Who are you investing in? What are her dreams? How does she want to make this world a better place? Mentorship is a powerful way for our generations to work together. Remember, we're in this together, and together we are the excellence in an age of mediocrity. Thank you so much for having me this morning.